Hello, welcome back. This is More to the Story. I'm your host, Janna Maron. In addition to this podcast, I also publish a literary arts magazine called Under the Gumtree, publishing creative nonfiction and visual art. You can find out more about the magazine, subscribing, and submitting your work to be considered for publication online at underthegumtree.com. I'm also a book coach and editor for women writing nonfiction, and you can find out about working with me and my services and offerings over at my company website, moretothestory.co. And if you missed it last week, I talked all about what is a book coach. So if you're curious about what that is, what I do, how I work with clients, check out the episode from last week. You know, I'm realizing one thing I didn't talk about that I wanted to talk about last week was the difference between book coaching, developmental editing, and ghostwriting, because I had that question recently. So maybe that's a future episode. I'm going to write that down so I don't forget. Difference between ghostwriting and developmental editing. Okay. So thank you so much for being here. This is an episode that's publishing for April 7th, and I'm recording it on March 18th. So if you listened to last week's episodes and I said that I was recording on March 18th, you got it. I recorded 2 episodes on the same day because as I'm recording, it's Tuesday. On Saturday, I'm getting ready to leave and be gone for a week. I'm going to be in Baja California for 3 or 4 days, and then from there going to LA for AWP. So if I met you at AWP, it was great to meet you. I hope you found the podcast and that we can stay in touch. Thank you for being here. Thanks for finding me. So I'm trying to prepare myself and make sure that my content and my podcast episodes can keep publishing even while I'm out of town and not able to record. And so that's why I'm recording so far in advance. So this is the episode for April 7th. And I wanted to talk about, I mentioned last week, this idea of capacity and energy in the midst of all the things that I have going on. And here I am on the heels of what was a really busy month. Like by the time you're listening to this, I will have just had a very busy month. I was out of town March 14th to the 17th for a conference over that weekend in the middle of March. It was in Palm Springs. I live in Sacramento, California, so my husband came with me and he drove. We drove together. And one of the reasons we drove is that I had the opportunity to participate in an event at that conference where I was giving away back issues of Under the Gumtree. So I was transporting 5 boxes of magazines. So driving made sense, even though it was kind of a long drive. And then we will be driving again to LA for AWP because, again, I'm bringing magazines. I'm bringing all the supplies that I need for my booth at the conference. And living in the same state makes the most sense to drive and not have to worry about how am I going to get it all there. When it's across country, it definitely makes it much harder for me to transport everything that I need. Yes, I can ship it, but you know what? That just adds to the cost. It's really expensive to ship, especially magazines, because they're heavy. I mean, boxes of magazines are very expensive to ship. It's just the way it is. So by the time you're listening to this, I will have already done AWP. Right now, I've only done one of those conferences as I'm recording. And I'm already reflecting on, was that the best decision? Was it the best decision for me to commit to doing 2 conferences kind of back to back the way that they landed? I mean, I was fully committed to going to AWP because it's in LA. Can't pass up going to that conference when it's in my home state. But last year, it was in Kansas City, and I was just at the beginning of I had been doing new treatments after my relapse for about a year, and I still felt like I was in recovery mode because I was still really struggling with fatigue and low energy, and I just knew that the travel would be hard, and I was going by myself. I knew that traveling by myself would be hard. I was still having numbness and tingling in my hands, which made carrying and lifting things really challenging. I was having all this anxiety about how am I going to get my suitcase, because I took a carry-on. How am I going to get my suitcase in the overhead compartment? I wasn't sure I would be able to lift it myself because of my hands. And so because of all of that, I flew in on Thursday and I was there for Friday only. I did the conference one day at the table with Dorothy Rice, my managing editor. And then we had our offsite reading Friday night. And then Saturday I flew back home. And it was such a relief for me to be able to make that choice and that decision and still attend, still participate, because I didn't want to miss out on the offsite event. That's my favorite thing of AWP, is the reading that we're able to put on in partnership with 3 other nonfiction publications, Fourth John River Teeth, Hippocampus Magazine. And I didn't want to miss out on that because I had missed out on it the year before, because the year before was only a few months after my relapse and I was in no condition to travel. And it was literally like a month after I had done 5 days of high dose steroids by infusion, which if anyone has ever done steroids, they really knock you out. It was, aside from the relapse, the steroid treatment was almost worse. So I was in no condition to travel and I had to miss AWP altogether in 2023. So last year, the decision that I made to go for just one day and stay 2 nights, and it really felt like such a blessing to be able to make that choice. Not only to make that choice, but also to have the support with a team with someone on my team like Dorothy, who was able to be there for the whole time and work our table and still have representation at the conference, but I didn't have to be there personally. So I wanted to talk more about that because I think it shows up in our life in logistics like this with travel and things that are draining by default of the circumstances. But it also shows up just in our creative life when we feel like we don't have the capacity or the mental bandwidth or the clarity or the focus to just sit down and pay attention to the work in front of us, especially as writers. Like, writing is a very cerebral activity. We have to think to be able to do it, And so the title of this episode is When You Learn Something the Hard Way. Because in addition to everything that I just shared about the travel that I've been doing, 2 things happened for me recently, not related to the travel, that made me think, oh, I want to talk about this. I want to write about this. And that is, let's see, it's March. So we're talking about the treatments that I had in February and March, which you may remember from previous episodes. I get medication by IV infusion every 28 days. And so in the month of January and maybe even December, I think it was, those infusions happened to land on a Wednesday, and I usually like to get them. And I'm very fortunate that I have, for about a year, been getting my infusions at home, where the medical center where I get my treatments, they have a home health department, and my neurologist referred me to them for my infusions because I had been going to the cancer center. And every time I was there, the nurses were having problems placing the IV for my infusion. My veins are very finicky. They have me labeled as what's called a hard stick because my veins frequently don't participate. And it has happened to me where at the cancer center, unfortunately, they've had to poke me 4, 5, 6 times just to get the IV placed. And that just adds, first and foremost, it was an ordeal to go to the hospital and go to the cancer center and be there for it really should have only been 2 hours because the infusion is 2 hours, is 1 hour. So, okay, whatever prep work has to be done in advance to place the IV, the infusion is an hour, and then like after the infusion is done, they have to take the IV out and like check me out and all of that. So it really should be 2 hours, but it turned into like 3-4 hours sometimes because of how bad it was with like getting the IV placed. So I'm very fortunate to get my IVs, my infusions at home, and the neurologist, his thinking, rightly so, is that home health nurses have to be much more highly skilled with placing IVs because it's just them. There's no backup. If one, like at the cancer center, what was happening is if one person couldn't get the IV placed, they would call somebody else over. Well, if you're a home health nurse and you're going to somebody's house and you're placing the IV, you're the only person, they're very skilled at it. And so far that has been the case for me. I feel very fortunate that I now get to just stay home in my pajamas on my couch with my cats. Usually my husband Jeremy is home. I can drink my coffee, watch my TV, and just be comfortable, cozy for this thing that I have to do every 28 days, because that's the other thing, is every 28 days. It's an ordeal. It's a hassle. It's just a lot. And so I don't remember how many months, but at least 2 months, maybe December, January, the infusion happened to fall on a Wednesday. And because I'm getting the infusion at home, I usually like to get them as early as I can in the day. So like 9 o'clock, that means by 10:30, 11 o'clock at the latest, I'm done and I can just chill and rest for the rest of the day. Well, on Wednesdays, Jeremy started working at home at the end of last year. Jeremy has a standing Wednesday call. And I like to have him on the couch with me while I'm getting my infusion. It's just like the extra comfort and support of a person there being with me when I'm going through this experience. It's not, now that I've been doing it for as long as I have been doing it, it's not like it's uncomfortable or painful except for the IV placing. And when I first started the infusions, I did have extreme fatigue, sometimes headaches, but I think my system has pretty much adjusted and mostly gotten used to the medication by now. I usually only have about 24 hours of fatigue afterward. So I just like to have my support person with me and next to me. So the infusion had landed on a Wednesday for a couple months, and Jeremy would have to be in his office on this call. And it kind of makes it awkward when he's on a call talking. You can still kind of hear what he's saying. And there's this nurse in our house. And so we decided, okay, I can't have the infusions on Wednesdays anymore. So some of them were already scheduled out into the future. So we just like moved them by one day to Thursday. Well, the first month that happened, the Thursday infusion was last month in February. And of course it was an appointment where the nurse was new and she couldn't place my IV. So she had to call one of the other nurses to come over and place the IV, and then she stayed. So it took 3 attempts to place the IV. It's the first time that's ever happened since I've been getting infusions at home. And so the other nurse came, placed the IV, and then left because he had his own patient that he had to go treat. And then the first nurse stayed with me until through the whole infusion. And the appointment was at 9 o'clock, and I had something scheduled at noon with clients. And I thought for sure when I moved it from Wednesday to Thursday, I'm usually done by 10:30. So I was like not worried about showing up for my clients at noon. Well, because of the nurse not being able to place my IV and we had to wait for the other nurse to show up, I was not done with my infusion that day until 11:45. So not only was I bruised up from 3 different tries on the IV, I was more tired because that just induces stress and anxiety, which is draining and triggering for my immune system. And then I was rushing to make sure I looked decent enough and had my water and all the things that I needed for the call with my clients. And I just was okay, can't do the infusions on a day that I have clients anymore. Well, so then the next month this month, March, the infusion was scheduled for Thursday when I had clients. And so I said, okay, can't do that. How can I reschedule? And even I could have kept it the same day, but moved it until after my client call. But they didn't have the availability to accommodate that. And so the option was Friday. So we bumped it one day to Friday. I usually go to yoga on Fridays, so I couldn't go to yoga that day. I also had another appointment scheduled that day for like 12:30, I think it was. So the appointment was for 10. I think it was 10. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have a nurse. I'm not going to have that nurse who couldn't place the IV. I'm going to have a different nurse this time. So 10, I should be done by 11:30. 12 at the latest. I should have plenty of time to get to this other appointment, 12:30. And this time the appointment was in person. I had to leave my house to go somewhere for the appointment. Well, the nurse was a little late and we had to talk about something before he got started on the IV. And I was not done with my infusion until 12:45. So I had to cancel the 12:30 appointment. So 2 months in a row, my infusions, just hit the mic. My infusions landed on a day when I had other things scheduled, and I was expecting the infusion to finish in time for me to do the other thing, and it didn't. Or it did 1 month, but it was still so close that it was not helpful for me, and I was totally exhausted and drained and I barely pulled through. Let's put it that way. So when you learn something the hard way, so what I learned from those two experiences is that I cannot have my infusion on a day with anything else scheduled. My infusions have to be on a day with absolutely nothing else on the calendar. I cannot do my infusion and anything else on the same day. That's what I learned, which I had been doing up until February. I had been keeping my infusion days protected and clear. It just so happened that it started landing on these days with other things, and I had been feeling okay, and so I thought I could do it. I thought it would be fine. I thought I could pull through. I thought it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And I learned that I was wrong. And so going forward, I'm scheduling my infusions on days with nothing else, or I'm just, if they land on days with other things, I'm clearing the rest of the day. And so when you have these experiences, for me personally, those two experiences were very, I was going to say triggering, but I don't feel like that's the right word. They were just unsettling. They kind of shook me up because suddenly I felt I was trying to function like a normal person. I was trying to function like someone without a chronic illness who could just go get a blood draw and then go back to work, or who could go get their teeth cleaned and go back to work, or who could go to a doctor appointment and then go back to work. When the reality is, guess what? My infusions are not the same thing as a blood draw. They're not the same thing as getting my teeth cleaned. They're not the same thing as going to a doctor appointment. And even for someone like me going to the doctor these days, I don't go back to work after going to the doctor because the doctor appointment could be a 3-hour long ordeal, and then I'm just exhausted. So it was just eye-opening. It was kind of a wake-up call around no, Janna, you are not someone who can function at the same level that you have functioned in the past. And this came up for me also with the conference that I just went to over the weekend, where Jeremy, my husband, came with me, and we drove and he came with me and he did all the driving, and I mentioned I was at an event where I was giving away back issues of Under the Gum Tree. So we had 5 boxes of magazines in the car with us. And I was also hosting a meetup, and I made a sign for the meetup. And so Jeremy we stayed in an Airbnb, not at the conference hotel. So he would drive me and drop me off in the morning at the beginning of the conference. For the event, he came and dropped off the magazine boxes and loaded them onto a luggage cart for me and unloaded them for me at the table where I was setting up. And then at the end of the night, he loaded them all back onto the luggage cart and into the car. And the night that I was hosting my meetup, I had forgotten my sign. It was in the car. So he came back to the hotel to bring me my sign to make sure that I had the sign for the meetup. And at the end of the day, he was in charge of making sure that that I got fed, basically. He was in charge of deciding where we were going to have dinner and like having a reservation if we needed a reservation, and picking me up at the end of the day and taking me to the restaurant. And right before we left for this conference, I started having all of this internal angst and like agita. Agita is how my Italian gramps talks about the irritation. It's just like a word, an Italian word that he uses it's for agitated, basically, agita, around Jeremy coming with me to this conference. And he's coming with me to AWP. He is coming with me, but by the time you listen to it, he will have already came with me. Nothing like recording it in advance to throw off your tense selection. And I just started feeling like I should be able to do this by myself. I should be able to drive myself. I should be able to carry these boxes. I should be able to be there without needing this extra support. I should be able to I should be able to do this on my own. Is having Jeremy there somehow affecting my personal involvement and my experience of the conference? Am I going to be less present, less engaged, less participatory because my husband is there and I have to connect with him and also think about what he needs? And it just changes the experience of being at a conference like that, especially it being a conference for women. And here I am bringing my husband. and I realized, this is shame. Like I was feeling that there's something wrong with me, that I'm not able to do this by myself on my own, that I need this extra support. That means there's something wrong with me. That means I'm less capable. That means I'm, I don't know, dependent on this crutch of like having, that I'm codependent. And maybe I am a little bit, but you know what? Like for someone like me, I am dependent. And that's just the way it is. I am dependent. I am dependent on extra support and help. And that's my reality. And I have to be okay with that. And then do you know what happened? Probably because Jeremy was there, the first night there was the opening welcome party, which I attended, and Jeremy just kind of hung out at the hotel bar while I was doing that. And because he was there, guess what? He met 2 other dudes who were there with their significant others as just like emotional support. And we ended up hanging out with them. And it turned into a different conference experience for me because I wasn't connecting like really as much one-on-one with all the other women that were there. But I did have opportunities to do that. But instead, I connected with people who are probably more like me because they had their significant others there just like I did. And Jeremy hit it off with them. And so we all kind of hit it off together as a group. And it was this beautiful reminder of just leaning into the stage of life that I'm in, owning and acknowledging the needs that I have, the limitations that I have, asking for help, speaking up about my needs. And this is the second year that I had been to this conference. So I went to the conference by myself last year. And the experience for me this year having Jeremy there was like night and day. I slept better. I was less stressed. I felt like I felt a freedom to just kind of let go and do what I needed to do without feeling this obligation to attend all the sessions and do all the things. And I don't know what it was about having Jeremy there that allowed me to have this freedom, that feeling of this freedom of like, it's okay for me to do whatever I need to do. But maybe it's because I wasn't staying at the conference hotel and I had someone there who was supporting me in that decision and facilitating my literal transportation from the conference hotel to the Airbnb where we stayed, that just, I felt like it was okay. I was doing what I needed to do and it was okay, and it made everything better for me. And I was more present, more connected in the moments when I had the opportunity to do that because I had the support that I needed. So all of that connects directly back to creative work, because for me, showing up at those type of events is creative. You know, I hosted this meetup for authors at the conference. That is a creative outlet for me. I'm facilitating, I'm bringing people together, I'm making sure everybody is introducing themselves. I'm asking questions, letting the group ask questions, giving everyone an opportunity to speak. That is a creative expression for me. It's not the same as sitting down in front of the computer and typing and writing and having the focus and the mental energy and capacity to like pay attention to the words that I'm typing on a page. But when I allow myself to ask for help and receive the support, I am able to show up so much better, so much more fully and authentically and freely and openly, because I have this place to kind of like fall back on, because I know that when I'm done, I'm going to be taken care of. Woo, and even just saying that got me a little welled up, teary-eyed. So imagine if you had that kind of support just for your writing, for your book project. And how can you get that kind of support for yourself? What do you need to say? What do you need to articulate? What needs do you need to say out loud with your significant other, with your kids, with your coworkers, with your boss, whoever it is in your life? You know, and in this case, it really was very simple for me. The conference was coming up and I said to Jeremy, would you come with me? I said, you know, I've already been to this conference once last year. I wished that you had been there when I was there last year. I knew that I probably would have been having a better experience if you had been there. Will you come with me? And he agreed, of course. And then as we were leading up to going, he asked me specifically, like, what is my role? What do you want me to do while I'm there? And I told him, I was like, well, for the event, I'm going to need you to literally schlep these boxes back and forth. And I'm going to need you to take me to and from the hotel. And I'm going to need you to be in charge of meals, dinner, because the conference included breakfast and lunch for attendees. And I'm going to need you to just take care of me at the end of the day. really, like, he does that already in our everyday life when we're at home. So, like, really what I needed was that level of care and support while at a conference where I'm, like, really outputting all of this extra additional energy. And how can you advocate for the support that you need with the people in your life? And it's really as simple as having a conversation. But first, even before you have the conversation, it's the self-awareness. Like, me realizing that I'm learning lessons the hard way with when my infusions are falling on the calendar, and I gotta, like, pay closer attention when those get scheduled. In fact, the one that's coming up in April, I think I need to reschedule. The one that's in May, I know for sure I need to reschedule. So I got to look at my calendar and reschedule these appointments. And that's negotiating and advocating for myself literally with healthcare providers. But in the case of this conference, being self-aware and realizing, like, oh, that was the experience that I had last year. I bet it would be better. I bet it would be better. I bet things would improve for me if I just had the support and the care of my husband while I'm there. Let's have a conversation. Does that make sense? Can we make it work? Can we pull it off? And we did. How would your creative life change for the better if you were able to advocate for yourself, cultivate self-awareness around what it is that would help things be better and improve for you, then advocate for it and have the conversations that you need to have? That's my challenge for you. So you maybe have been learning lessons the hard way up to this point. So now the challenge is, what do you need to do to make change? And how can you make change for the better so that you're better supported, so that you can better show up for yourself and your creative work? Think about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Visit moretothestorypodcast.substack.com to leave your comments. You can follow me on Instagram at Janna Marlise. You can follow Under the Gumtree on Instagram at Under Gumtree. The theme song is written and performed by my husband, Jeremy Maron. You can follow him if you're into wine at Existential Wine Guy. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again on the next episode of More to the Story.